humiliated me before his pack for her. Then I chose his rival Alpha King. Elena Voss had loved Damian Blackthorn for 3 years, before she understood that love was not the same as being chosen. She had known from the very first night, when the mark bloomed on her wrist like a small silver flame, that she was his fated mate. The bond was supposed to be sacred among the wolf packs of the Northern Territories, a pull deeper than choice, older than reason. Alphas across the land spoke of their fated mates, the way people spoke of miracles. Damian never did. He had accepted the bond the way a man accepts an unwanted gift, setting it aside politely and never looking at it again. Still, Elena stayed. She told herself that love was patient, that bonds took time, that Damian carried burdens as alpha, that made softness difficult for him. She ran the medical wing of Blackthorn territory with quiet skill, tending to warriors after border skirmishes, delivering pups in the dead of winter, holding trembling hands through fevers no one else wanted to sit beside. She kept his house in order. She waited by the window some evenings, hoping he would come home and simply talk to her, not about pack business, but about anything at all. He rarely did. Everyone in Blackthorn territory knew where Damian's heart truly lived, with Selene Marsh, a human woman he had grown up beside, the daughter of his father's oldest ally. Selene was clever and charming, beloved by the pack elders, always present at Damian's side during councils and feasts. Elena had watched them together more times than she could count, had seen the easy laughter between them, and had told herself, again and again, that friendship was not betrayal. She was wrong, and she learned it in the cruelest way possible. The Founder's Moon ceremony was the most important night of the year for Blackthorn territory. Every wolf in the pack gathered in the great hall beneath banners older than memory, to honor the founding of their land and renew their loyalty to the Alpha line. Elena had dressed carefully that evening, choosing a deep blue gown, pinning her hair the way Damian had once said he liked. She had hoped, foolishly, that tonight might be different. It was different, just not in the way she had hoped. Damian stood at the front of the hall as the ceremony reached its peak, the firelight catching the sharp lines of his face, and he lifted his hand for silence. Elena had been standing near the healers section, and something in his expression made her stomach turn cold before he even spoke. "Tonight," Damian said, his voice carrying easily across the hall, "I want to be honest with this pack, as an alpha should be." He turned and reached for Selene's hand, drawing her forward into the firelight. "Selene Marsh has stood beside me since we were children. She understands this pack, and she understands me, in ways that go beyond blood or bonds. I am naming her my chosen consort." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elena felt her heart stop. Damian continued, his eyes finally finding hers across the hall, and there was no apology in them, only a kind of tired resolve, as if he were simply correcting an old mistake. "The mate bond between myself and Elena Voss was never something either of us asked for. It was a technicality nature got wrong. I have too much respect for her to keep pretending otherwise." The hall went silent. Elena felt every eye turn toward her, felt the heat crawl up her neck, felt the mark on her wrist burn as though it too had heard the words, and did not believe them. "Elena is welcome to remain and continue her work in the medical wing," Damian said, as though he were offering her a gift. "But I ask that she step aside from any claim on my side, gracefully, for the good of the pack." As if 3 years of devotion could be folded up and tucked away like an old coat, once it was no longer convenient. Elena looked around the hall. She saw pity on some faces, and something colder on others. A kind of relief that the awkward question of the healer and the human girl had finally been settled. No one spoke in her defense. No one stepped forward. The elders who had once praised her steady hands now looked at their feet. She could have argued, she could have wept, or shouted, or demanded Damian explain himself before the pack he claimed to lead with honesty. Instead, something inside her went very quiet and very clear, like a lake freezing over in a single night. She did not say a word. She simply turned, walked the length of the hall with her spine straight and her chin level, and stepped out into the cold night air, leaving the fire and the murmurs behind her. She did not stop walking until she reached the edge of Blackthorn territory, where the trees grew thinner and the old stone markers signaled the border with the neighboring lands. She did not know where she meant to go. She only knew she could not spend one more night in a house that had never truly been hers. It was there, at the border, that she met Kane Ashworth for the first time. He arrived on horseback with 2 of his guards, moving with the unhurried confidence of a man who ruled his own kingdom and had never needed to prove it to anyone. Elena had heard his name many times before. Alpha Kane Ashworth, ruler of the territory beyond the river, Damian's rival in nearly every matter of land, trade, and pride. The 2 alphas had spent a decade locked in careful, simmering competition, each one determined never to let the other gain an advantage. Kane dismounted slowly, studying her with an expression she could not quite read. "A border scout brought word of what happened tonight," he said. "I did not believe it until I saw you standing here alone." Elena straightened, wiping quickly at her eyes, embarrassed to be seen this way by a man she barely knew, let alone her Alpha's greatest rival. "I don't need pity, Alpha Ashworth." "I'm not offering any," Kane said simply. "I came because I wanted to see the truth for myself. It seems I have." There was no mockery in his voice, no satisfaction at Damian's expense, only a quiet, steady honesty that Elena had almost forgotten men were capable of. He did not ask her to explain herself. He did not press her for details of the humiliation she had just endured. He simply offered her shelter for the night in his territory and safe passage back to Blackthorn lands if that was what she wished in the morning. Elena accepted, too exhausted to weigh the wisdom of it. She did not return to Blackthorn territory the next morning, or the morning after that. In the weeks that followed, Elena found herself drawn into the rhythms of Ashworth territory, almost without meaning to. Kane's healers were skilled, but overworked, and Elena, unable to sit idle, offered her help in their medical hall. Her knowledge of pack medicine, refined over years in Blackthorn's own healing wing, proved invaluable. She worked alongside Kane's people, earning their trust one careful stitch and one steady night watch at a time. Kane visited the medical hall often, not to oversee her work, but simply to talk. He asked about her training, her years of study, the small satisfactions of her craft. He listened when she spoke, really listened, in a way that made Elena realize how rarely Damian ever had. Kane never pushed her to speak of Blackthorn, or of the humiliation that had brought her to his lands. When she did bring it up, one quiet evening, while helping to catalog herbs, he simply said, he lost something valuable, and did not even know it. That is not a mistake I intend to make. Elena found herself flushing, unsure whether to laugh or protest. You barely know me, Alpha Ashworth. I know enough, Kane said. I know a woman who held her composure in front of a hall full of people who failed her. I know a healer whose hands do not shake, even after a night like that one. I know I would like the chance to know more, if you'll allow it. There was no urgency in his words, no demand, just an offer, laid gently on the table, for her to take or leave as she wished. Elena took it slowly. Over the following months, she remained in Ashworth territory, her role in the medical hall growing, until she led it in all but name. Kane's attention never wavered, never grew impatient, never made her feel as though her worth was measured only by what she could offer him. He asked her opinion on matters of trade and border policy, not because tradition demanded it, but because he seemed to genuinely value her judgment. He remembered small things, the tea she preferred, the particular ache in her shoulder after long hours at the healing table, the anniversary of her mother's passing. For the first time in years, Elena felt seen, not as a mate bound by an accident of fate, but as a person Kane had chosen to notice, again and again, by his own will. Word of Elena's departure had not gone unnoticed in Blackthorn territory. Without her steady presence in the medical wing, and without the quiet stability she had brought to pack affairs, cracks began to show. Selene, for all her charm, had never been trained in the delicate work of healing, nor in the political weight a mate's presence carried in negotiations with other packs. Alliances that had once leaned on Elena's careful diplomacy began to falter. Whispers moved through Blackthorn territory. Whispers that Damian had traded something essential for something merely comfortable. Damian, proud as he was, did not admit his mistake easily. But as autumn turned toward winter, and Ashworth territory's growing strength became impossible to ignore, he requested a formal treaty summit between the two territories, ostensibly to discuss trade routes along the river border. Elena knew, the moment she heard of the summit, that Damian's true purpose was not trade at all. She was right. The summit was held in neutral territory, a wide hall built specifically for negotiations between rival packs. Its walls hung with banners from both Blackthorn and Ashworth lands. Elders and representatives from both territories filled the room. Elena stood near Kane, no longer the quiet healer lingering at the edges of a hall, but a woman with a clear place beside her alpha. Damian addressed the trade matters first, brief and businesslike, his eyes flicking toward Elena more than once. When the formal discussion ended, he asked for a private moment, and Elena, unwilling to let this conversation happen in shadows, agreed to speak with him in front of both gathered parties. "The bond between us is still there, Elena," Damian said, his voice lower now, stripped of the careless authority he'd worn the night of the ceremony. "I was wrong to dismiss it. Selene could not hold what you held for this pack. I ask you to come home." The old Elena might have wavered at those words, might have remembered 3 years of hope and let it pull her back. But the woman standing in that hall was not the same one who had walked out of Blackthorn's great hall in silence. "You didn't just dismiss a bond, Damian," Elena said, her voice steady and carrying clearly across the room. "You dismissed me, in front of everyone who mattered, and asked me to smile through it for the good of your pack. I did smile, once, waiting for you to be someone else. I don't intend to wait again." She turned to Kane, who watched her with quiet steadiness, offering no pressure, only patience, the same patience he had shown her from the very first night at the border. "I choose Ashworth territory," Elena said, "not because fate marked my wrist, but because a man here chose to see me, every day, without needing a bond to tell him I was worth choosing." The hall was silent, much as it had been the night of the Founder's moon, but this silence felt different. This time, Elena did not feel small within it. She felt, for the first time in longer than she could remember, entirely her own. Kane stepped forward and took her hand, not as a claim, but as a promise, and led her from the hall while Damian remained behind, facing a room full of allies who had already begun to question the judgment of an alpha who let something so valuable slip so easily through his hands. In the seasons that followed, Elena became Kane's queen consort in truth as well as title, and the old rivalry between Blackthorn and Ashworth softened into something new, an alliance built not on old fears, but on mutual respect, much of it grown from the medical partnerships Elena herself established between the two territories. Damian's pack, meanwhile, struggled quietly under the weight of a mistake its alpha could not undo, his authority never quite as steady as it once had been. Elena often stood on the border wall of Ashworth territory in the evenings, watching the sun set over land that had become, in every way that mattered, her home. She no longer waited by windows for someone to notice her. She had learned, in the hardest way possible, that being chosen was not something to beg for. It was something to walk toward, on her own 2 feet, until the right person was there to meet her.